Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning, good morning, good morning. So I want to put this video on here because this is just the basics as far as Darwinism, plus then where modern science has picked up where Darwinism left off. And then my information is picking up where modern science is leaving off. This is so interesting. All right, I'm eating right now some cereal and milk because I'm starving. I had a bunch of coffee this morning, then my body was like, okay, too much coffee, and it started peeing everything out. And this is why you lose water, is because your body finally gets enough minerals from your coffee intake that it now is taking the water that's in your body and carrying out any extra minerals and mycotoxins that it may be taking in from the coffee. Okay. Hold on a second. Hold on, I just got to eat this real quick because it's going to go soggy. I'm eating honey bunches of oats. And I'm trying to process this information too in my head. So we know in the smaller picture why death happens, why people die, because there's so many mutations that the body cannot adapt to its environment. You see it all around you. You see all the cancer, disease, and chronic illness, and that is basically the inability to adapt to your environment. So something is going on in a person's DNA, and something is triggering these DNA switches. I learned about these DNA switches from that movie, from this YouTube, the evolution and Darwinism and beyond Darwinism and everything. But in order to understand in order to understand and create something new for humanity, we have to understand the basics. And we are taking all the information from like Darwin from way back when, and then taking what we're doing now with modern science and bringing that in to understand what the bigger picture is, or the smaller picture, to then create a bigger picture and then work backwards. Okay. And so what I've noticed, well, actually not even what I've noticed, this is what triggered all of this now, this new information that I'm just, not really new information, but a different revelation based upon stuff that's already been substantiated. So we turned off Netflix for a minute because we didn't update our systems. And so instead of, me updating the system, my husband's all like the techie in my family, but I just turned off Netflix. So I was without Netflix for a minute, and I just didn't want to spend so much time on Netflix because I know I was watching all these crazy videos like Dynasty and all these garbage shows. And so I'm like, okay, I'm spending too much time on Netflix. I need to go, and just put more emphasis in my group and other research, and then other things that were going on in my life. So, which is fine. I went through my experiences and everything and did what I got to do. And then just the way the universe works, my husband updated our system, and then he wanted to turn Netflix back on. So we turned Netflix back on. So, of course, what you watch on Netflix is going to be determining what it is you're going to get out of Netflix. Now, you can be watching all the satanic shows and think that Netflix is so horrible and satanic and whatever. But there's always been this show that I saw, but I avoided like the plague. And I don't know why, but it's called The Evolution of Us. And I've seen it on Netflix before I turned it off. And I'm like, I should watch this, but then I'm like, I don't really want to watch this. I wasn't ready for it. It wasn't really in my mind yet because I didn't see a need to watch The Evolution of Us, which is a documentary on Netflix. But for some reason, yesterday, I'm like, I need to watch this show. I need to watch it. And I was ready for it. I actually had the focus to really understand now what current academia and biotechnology has studied to now keep us where we are, to why we still are living. and what has caused the diversity in animals and in humans. And so I watched the evolution of us, and they were talking about, why certain dynasties in China and were able to win in wars against other dynasties, and then they trace it back to the foods that they ate, the agriculture, all these different things, and it's a really good rudimentary about evolution, about and then modern medicine, how it came to be, and then the diet. And it seemed like sugar and hormones. And this is just a very brief, I didn't watch it so closely like I did this video today that I watched on YouTube, which is really, it's in the comments. But from what my takeaway was that the milk and the sugar and the meat is what made the Mongols, Genghis Khan, be able to win against the Jinns, who were a strictly agricultural society, only eating carbs. It gave them a quick burst of energy, and then they crashed. And so the Mongols that were eating the milk and the meat and also, I'm sure, vegetables too, they were able to sustain a longer fighting time. They were able to take over, continents and all that stuff. So Genghis Khan was super, super, super strategic and strong. Like, his whole army was strong because they were drinking milk. The hormones seem to play a part in the strength of humanity. The hormones, the meat, of course, vegetables too. But it seems that there was a difference in the fighting styles based upon the diet of the army. And then, of course, to be able to chew, and the amylase, which is able to process and turn the foods into sugars to give it energy, and then the hormones and all that. And so, yeah, in the larger brains, I'm learning today, from the video that I watched about the evolution on that YouTube video, is based upon the muscles and the fact that there's a mutation in our chewing muscles, to where in the chewing muscles in chimps, it seems to stop the brain growth because of the plates, the skull plates has stopped the brain growth because of the muscles in the chewing style. And then we are only getting like a fourth of the chewing mechanism that apes have. So then it allows our brains to grow bigger, and then opposable thumbs and all that stuff. So you should watch that video. But I am now really focusing on the bigger picture. So these are the small details that all of us should learn. Okay, so the evolution of us on Netflix, and then evolution Darwinism on the YouTube that I have in this thread. And I'm looking at why humanity is dying. We already know why humanity is dying, because of the inability to adapt to our surroundings. Okay, so it's the cancer, disease, and chronic illness, the mutations. And what's going on is that what my question, and this is the thing that I've been looking, I know I'm kind of scattered, because this is kind of like new in my world as far as bringing this information in and bringing in evolution and Darwinism, because somehow they're talking about switches, genetic switches, of why it is that animals have evolved from being like, we have supposedly our single ancestor is a fish, and then how the fish evolved into a land-dwelling animal, to then the different species that eventually turned into man, who is what we are today. But what kind of triggered it too was the whole thing with skin pigmentation, and that mutations is based upon your adaptation to the environment. Those of you who are pissed off about the chemtrails and the 5G and all that stuff, you have an inability to adapt to your environment. Because if somebody wanted you dead, you would be dead. All of humanity would be dead. You wouldn't be around. Okay? So what has allowed humans and animals to live even for 50 or 60 years is their ability to adapt to the changing conditions. How does that manifest? It manifests in our DNA. It manifests in either their skin color or hair color, our muscle mass, our ability to protect ourselves. And I'm looking at one like, okay, so I came from Vietnam. So I was in a war-torn country. Then I was transferred over to the United States, getting all my vaccines, yes, into a white family in Saratoga, California. And then I've experienced a lot of different lifestyles even since then. I moved to different states, moved to different socioeconomic statuses, moved to different cities, different friends, different groups, different thought processes, and I was able to adapt to every single one and able to take on the culture and take on the belief system for about a minute. Okay? So the ability to adapt to your surrounding is going to determine your longevity. And right now we're seeing in humanity many people with cancer disease and chronic illness and activists who are pissed off against the chemtrails and the 5G and all this other stuff have the inability to adapt, and they will be the ones that will either reproduce and bring on an extension of themselves. And that's what kids are. Kids are an extension of who you are because you couldn't adapt to your surroundings. So when you reproduce, now this is an extension of yourself. Okay, and this is why we have different cultures and different skin colors, because we did migrate and move to different regions, which then translates into different adaptation styles, like a darker skin versus lighter skin, and then all points in between. And then when I was looking at the whole thing with mutations, so why it is, so when I go out in the sun, when I was younger, when I went out in the sun, like in Hawaii, I was dark. I haven't seen myself that dark in a long ass time. Now, I've been out in the sun the last like 5 or 10 years, have been lately, but in the last 5 or 10 years, I've been out in the sun and I would look relatively dark because my body was able to take on the sun, process it. My body creates melanin and a protection against too much UV. But those that are super white and have a weak immune system and a weak body will not be able to adapt to the sun exposure. So guess what? They have to then put on coverings. And then they start getting skin cancer. Because when you have a weak body and you have too much sun and your body's not creating melanin, guess what? You have the inability to adapt to your surroundings. And this is what causes cancer, disease, and chronic illness, because we have people who cannot adapt to their surroundings. And then I'm thinking like, so then they talk about in this movie today about the genetic switches. But the DNA genetic switches and what would cause a switch, because there's like a, I don't know, DNA operator where they basically tell the genes when to turn on and when to turn off. But they never said in that movie, in this evolution movie, about what, even though they say that it's about usage, like what would cause an animal or a human to evolve in a specific way. And they say it's based upon usage and survival, but they didn't say exactly what was the mechanism. They say, yeah, there's specific DNA mutations, but they didn't say what it was. But then now I'm going to bring in where they have left off, where they haven't mentioned, and I was waiting for them to mention it, but they couldn't, is the bacteria that causes the DNA switches to then create the genetic diversity and create all the different animals, because all these different animals, like Darwinism, the Galapagos, okay, they have iguanas that are swimming, but then there's iguanas over in different areas that are not swimming, are living on like the desert. So why is it that the Galapagos has able to have animals that are able to swim? Well, because somehow they're able to adapt. But what would cause that adaptation? Why wouldn't the animals, all the animals that are on that island that were cut off from the regular land, why didn't they all just die off? And this is where I'm thinking that what's missing in these videos in biotech, specific bacteria that are also life forms want to live too, and they're the ones that actually trigger those switches to happen. And then you have the viruses and the bad bacteria that create the mutations to cause your inability to adapt to your surroundings, which is causing death. Now, you can adapt for a certain amount of time with these mutations, but then that's where reproduction comes into play, is that the fact that this is an extension of you. So I'm thinking, like, I'm doing like a time-lapse photography or time-lapse type of thing. And let's say you have like my genetic line. And if you went back to my original ancestor and you didn't think about death and reproduction, you just basically did like a continuum of my whole family. And let's say we stayed in Vietnam, you would see that we would basically be one person, but we just have this reproduction. That's the only difference. But it'd be just one person. And let's say my family, instead of staying in Vietnam, we moved to like the Antarctica or somewhere where there's hardly any sun. Well, then you would see a change in the DNA. And then I'm thinking the bacteria in that environment are also wanting to survive, that is controlling the switches to then create the ability to adapt. Now, what's different now with the J juice, and what I noticed there's a difference in my level of healing, because you saw me in my videos from way back when, where I was just like all over the place, you know, rambling, had different facial structure and all that stuff, right? And I was doing the 3-day ferment, and maybe I would be fermenting it longer, maybe not, because it'd be in the fridge and I would drink it and whatever, right? And I didn't really make this. I mean, I knew the connection was the lactobacillus, but I knew also nutrients, and then, you know, reversing the mutations and seeing a slow difference and everything. But it seems that the lactobacillus is able to switch on the genes that are able to then adapt to your surroundings. That, I think, is the key thing, is what kind of bacteria that works symbiotically with your biochemistry and your environment. And it seems that lactobacillus is the main component to be able to allow biodiversity to adapt to its surroundings. That's why you can't be afraid of the chemtrails, the 5G, and all of the bullshit that people are all activists against, because you have the ability to adapt to your fucking surroundings, but you have to bring in the right elements to do that. And this is what's missing right now in some of these videos. So the one video that I have right now, you guys should watch it, because that basically is, it's true. I see it as a truth, because I mean, humans were all the same. I mean, the variations in animals, I mean, they do it purposely. When they vary animals, they crossbreed them. They bring in certain genes to turn them on, turn them off, make them big, make them small, make them large, make them this. The hair versus not hair. There are genetic mutations in the population where somebody has like hair all over their body and all over their face. And that was one of the examples in the Netflix video, The Evolution of Us, where there are certain mutations that will turn on a gene to where now the hair is now growing all over the face instead of just a head in specific areas. But I think that, and so with the J juice, okay, and I'm not changing. I mean, my diet is the same diet that it was before me doing J juice, but I had to do discrimination to bring balance back into my diet. But it seems that what makes people strong is the hormones in the milk and / meat, obviously the fruits and vegetables and the nutrients, and getting in the right bacteria. You get in the wrong bacteria, it's going to cause mutations, cancer, disease, chronic illness, aging, death. I mean, that's what aging and death is your inability to adapt. And then when reproduction happens, is now an extension of you. Your children are an extension of what you couldn't adapt to. So you erase that whole thing of the born, you know, I don't say erase, but you do a time lapse and you just put yourself and your children, and then what creates then the variations in children, okay, in the why it is some kids will get muscular dystrophy and others don't, is there's a specific bacteria infection that will turn and switch on mutations or switch off certain things. And that's what I'm like, because that's the question I asked myself when I'm watching this video, is like, what they're talking about, all these different DNA switches and talking about, you know, adaptation and the diversity and variation and all this stuff, DNA and and there's 23,000 like genes in all of humans, which is, you know, about the same as a chicken, I guess, that they're saying. And so how can we have still a very low number of DNA of DNA than a chicken, or even, you know, a nematode? But it's the genetic diversity, it's what's getting turned on and turned off is the difference. And what and this and so when I did like a Google or a Google search, you know, just asking the question, and because I asked Google, but it didn't come up in the video, which I was surprised. Like, why didn't they talk about bacteria are turning DNA switches on and off? And this is what they said. So I asked myself the question earlier before I even found the answer. Do these microbes, these viruses, actually trigger the genetic glitches, triggering the genetic diversity to allow the animal to adapt to its environment? Because the virus, I don't say the virus, because maybe virus or bacteria need to adapt to its environment. So I put Kevin Banner, oh my gosh, because this is huge. watching this video on YouTube about evolution and natural selection talk about survival of the fittest and the genetic glitches that allow animals to adapt to their environment, but they don't talk about what causes those genetic glitches. They say, yeah, it has to do with usage and the environment and possibly even food too, okay? But still waiting, but I have yet to see that I'm still watching this video. And then I asked Google a question. Are DNA switches microbes? Or do microbes switch the DNA? Well, the short answer is that the bacteria can affect how our genes express themselves. They do not cause changes in actual genetic materials, the DNA or RNA, but rather they may have caused a gene to switch on or off to activate or not. That makes sense. So when you bring in the right bacteria, like mast mantle lactobacillus, like when I had that ferment, like, then I got off track for a minute. But when I took that 9-month ferment with the massive amount of lactobacillus, with the nutrients, with the salt, with the water, and understanding the healing symptoms as pain and everything, I noticed a jump in my healing, a jump in mental clarity. The amount of lactobacillus is a direct correlation to the jump in healing, the jump in your next level. But of course, those of you who are just starting this process, do the 3-day ferment. You can do it for longer because you're going to have to transition onto the protocol because pain's involved. You're going to see a lot of different changes of your biochemistry, and not everybody's prepared for those changes. Okay, so it's perfect that it's a 3-day ferment, and of course you can ferment it longer. But I'm telling you, it's the amount of lactobacillus is what the difference is. And of course, understanding the pain sequence, and of course, understanding the nutrition in the water and the salt. That's what everybody's all afraid of, is the salt. Oh my God. And understanding the role of sugar, and then realizing everything is broken down to sugar, elements, minerals, water, and air. That's all everything is broken down to. Everything is really broken down to the periodic tables. Where is it? Okay, everything's broken down to this. Everything. Okay? And then what causes the cancer, disease, and chronic illness is your exposure to viruses and bad bacteria. All these, and you can't help this. You can't control your exposure. This is everywhere. Everybody's exposed to this regardless. I don't care if you think it's from a vaccine, it's everywhere. So forget where it originated from, because it's been around. Microbes have been around for fucking centuries. It's getting in the right bacteria. Then we realize that lactobacillus, the right probiotics, but it can't be probiotics from kombucha, apple cider vinegar, yogurt, or grains, or alcohol. That's not the right probiotic. It may do superficial, type of changes for people based upon their intention, but really in reality, it's the probiotics from the cabbage and kale and the salt and the water. Okay? And so that seems to allow us to be able to then assimilate to our environment on a potentially indefinite basis. So when I was talking on Dr. Phil last year, I knew the bigger picture that we weren't supposed to die. I knew bigger picture that we could definitely regrow arms and limbs and organs and all that stuff that are missing, or we were born without them, because there have been genetic switches even in the womb based upon the mother's bacteria. Her microbiome is the major difference. And then kids who seem to, the kids that get like Down syndrome in one family and not, it's based upon what bacteria that they're exposed to that switched certain things. And when we learned about that, the Down syndrome and all that is based upon infection of their central nervous system, and it's based upon a virus. Viruses are what's causing the inability to adapt to where you're seeing now people dying at a younger age because they're not fixing the mutations, they don't know how to adapt to their environment, and they're focusing on the wrong stuff. And then I see people that are like anti-government, anti-school, and they're all focused on the flat earth and all that stuff. You're barking up the wrong tree. How is flat earth versus globe earth going to make any difference in your ability to adapt to the climate and adapt to the changing conditions of your environment to allow prolonged life and quality of life? Okay? And so we have to have a certain type of universal teachings as far as foods, as far as genetics, as far as just your basic how to get along in our society so we can have law and order. Because you get chaos, guess what? You get death. You get people who are anti-government, anti-this, off-gridding. Guess what? You have now pandemics in that environment, as well as it reaching out to other environments. Because look what happened back in the 1500s when they had the Black Plague, or 1918, the influenza outbreak. There's a video on my wall that talked about the influenza outbreak of 1918. Weak immune systems, weak bodies exposed to viruses that are aggressive. Guess what? You have a pandemic. So you want to be anti-government, anti-establishment, anti-this, anti-that. You want to be all on your own. You're going to be taken down by the microbes that you have no control over. And you don't even know how to bring in the right microbes because you have no, you're barking up the wrong tree. You're focused on flat Earth and globe Earth versus, hey, lactobacillus and nutrients really will contribute to the longevity of your family line. And so, let me see. There was this something I said on Facebook about mutations. So mutations have caused strength and adaptability in humans in specific environments, but then too many mutations now have the inability to adapt. So again, it's balance. Okay, you have too little antibodies, like I said on this thing, in this little quadrant that I created, okay, is that when you have too little antibodies right here, and this is where when you're a baby, okay, you don't get vaccines because your body is not able to handle that influx of how many viruses and things do you expose to. But as you get older, you need to strengthen your body because you live in a pathogenic society for people who don't take care of themselves or understand this stuff. So you have to get a vaccine, of course, and then you're strong and you're doing well, you're going to college, you graduate from college, you're in your career. And then you hit middle age and you start seeing going balding, you start seeing your body degrade, you start seeing that your body's not able to adapt anymore, you're not as strong as you used to be, you're seeing yourself, go downhill. And then also too, the microbes and the pathogens and the viruses are mutating because people are mutating them because they're not well and they're not adapting well and they're communicable. And so then, you get more vaccines or you get exposed to these viruses, which is further degrades your body, and you're not repairing the damage from your initial exposure. It doesn't matter if it's from a vaccine or from the environment, you're not repairing the mutations from your exposure. And you're around chemicals too, right, that are also further weakening, not causing cancer, because cancer is viruses, but your exposure to a conglomeration of chemicals or of elements further weakens your body. And then of course the antibodies that you've been exposed to, or the viruses turn into antibodies and they agglutinate because your body's breaking down. And then now you're seeing the autoimmune disorders come to surface. You're seeing cancer come to surface. You're seeing weaknesses are being exploited by viruses coming to surface. And then you start seeing people going to chemotherapy because they have cancer. You're seeing them go through different immunotherapies, suppressing the immune system, taking away the pain sequence because they don't understand that pain is healing. And then you start seeing further degradation. You're seeing people smoking so much pot, further anesthetizing themselves. And then all of a sudden you see now antibodies are agglutinating. You're seeing people dying. And then now you're at a point where you can't even get a vaccine because your body can't handle it. And this is when you die. If you can't even get a vaccine, it means that eventually your death is pretty much imminent. Not imminent, but if you have a high titer test and you're vaccine injured and you're not a candidate for a vaccine, those are some major fucking red flags. So the fact that you're able to get a vaccine and survive it, which means that if you can get a vaccine and survive it without freaking the hell out, without having too many complications, it means you can survive your environment. You can adapt. But babies can't adapt to their environment too well. They have to have protection in some way before they're able to adapt the environment. And then older people are not well adapted to their environment because the mutations on each end of the spectrum, okay, don't say the mutations. Mutations cause reproduction. But yes, the mutations cause weaknesses. And then you have now the choice. You have the ability to adapt. But right now, our current thought processes, we're not adapting very well. Okay? We're not. And this is where cancer, disease, and chronic illness comes into play. So you see the debunkers out there are not adapting very well to this information, which then is going to pave the way for their lack of ability to adapt. And then you'll see cancer, disease, and chronic illness run rampant in their world. And it already is. I mean, they're already exhibiting that. So, yeah, that's why the vaccine schedule is the way it is, because this is a reflection of your environment. This is not the cause. This vaccine schedule is not the cause of your illnesses. It's your lack of adaptability and the mutations that you've sustained, and you can't adapt to your mutations. And you're not bringing in the right bacteria. You're harboring all the wrong bacteria. You're over-mineralized because you're not releasing the excess. You have parasites in you. You have viruses in you that you're not releasing. Go get a titer test. This is what I really challenge all my debunkers and everyone out there that doesn't agree with me. Go get a titer test and we can see how pathogenic you are and how much communicable diseases you're contributing to your environment. Believe me, they won't want to divulge their titer test, because right now, anyone that is wanting to destroy anybody in a spiritual or physical level has a high titer test because they have too many microbes taking over them. And so when you're being taken over by microbes that are not friendly to you, they want to infect other people because they have to find another host. That's what parasitic qualities are, is when you're looking for a host to go and feed upon. You, as a strong cell structure or a strong conglomeration of cell structures, will deflect the parasitic qualities that are out there. And this is where the negative elements in your body from the elemental composition of the human body come into play to be able to deflect the parasitic qualities, the spiritual parasites as well as the physical parasites that are out there. Okay? And so this is some of the journey that people that are on JJUICE are dealing with, is the fact that they're now learning how to deflect and kick out the parasitic qualities that are in their world as well as in their body. And so that's why I got away from the activism. I got away from being anti-government, got away from all the conspiracy stuff, because those are parasitic qualities that are causing degradation in humanity. Okay, that's huge. And so I was waiting in that video, I was waiting for them to talk about the bacteria that are turning, waiting to talk about like the viruses that are turning these things on and off and causing weaknesses. No, they just talk about gene editing. They talk about, oh, taking away the HIV gene, switching that, taking away these specific types of virus genes. But that's all compartmentalization. Okay, so you switch off the HIV gene, turning that, whatever they do with the gene editing to where they take away specific diseases. But you know how many diseases are out there and how expensive these procedures are? And it still doesn't at all talk about the pain sequence, the prostaglandin hormone sequence. When you're going in surgically, going and switching genes on and off to then potentially give you a better quality of life, there's going to be the domino effect. When you go in and manipulate something, it doesn't get to the root cause still. And they don't talk about the root cause of all of these different, like the muscular dystrophy, or not microcephaly, where the brain is not able to grow to its normal capacity in humanity. And so the brain is like a third of its size that it's supposed to be. Well, that brain gene, whatever, to allow it to grow was turned off. What was it turned off? Well, I'm sure there was a virus or a bacteria somewhere involved that went in and switched off the brain growth. Okay, viruses switch your DNA on and off based upon its own intentions. Then there's certain good bacteria that will switch everything back on that's supposed to allow you to be able to adapt to your environment. And that's what I was waiting for, but they weren't talking about the bacteria. But yeah, I was able to Google and say, yeah, they're like, yeah, bacteria are able to switch things on and off. So you have also, like they said, there's probably like 80%, or we use only 20% or 10% of our brain, but the rest we don't use. Well, why is that? Are we not getting in the right bacteria to be able to switch those parts of the brain on? That could be the key to all of this, is the fact that we haven't brought in the right bacteria. And then when we do, the pain's involved, and then people get pissed off, or they don't understand chemistry and think salt's the enemy. So those are people that cannot adapt to the changing conditions of the environment. Those that are all in the chemtrails and the 5G and all this stuff, okay, they can't adapt to their surroundings, to the ever-changing conditions. I mean, look, the dinosaurs, they got extinct, but not because they were extinct. I think that they evolved based upon the climate and the atmosphere, the volcanoes, maybe the comets. Okay. And so now we have birds that were descendants from dinosaurs. I mean, we're descendant from fish. That's what I hear. That we have the same DNA structure as the embryo as fish. So through years and years and years of evolution, we have evolved into this human. And then I'm sure the right bacteria work symbiotically with our DNA, with our surroundings, had then given us the ability for opposable thumbs and a large brain. And then where we are today. So Darwin had his platform, his theory, which is obviously right on. He didn't have all the figures out as far as the mechanisms. And then we have the Human Genome Project and biotech and then DNA, and they're now picking up where Darwin left off. And then the J juice is picking up where biotech and AMA left off. Because what would happen if we can live indefinitely, then we wouldn't have to reproduce. We wouldn't reproducing. Because right now we're reproducing kids that have a lot of mutations because they're not getting fixed. So we have kids with autism, kids with Down syndrome, kids with eczema, psoriasis. All those are traced back to viruses that are left unresolved. And then they're able to adapt for a certain amount of time. But then when you have a kid that's autistic, they have to be watched over all the time. Maybe there are some therapies that can help them bring them to some certain level of normalcy, whatever that is, or people just don't even bother to do the therapies and their kid is forever autistic, turning into an autistic adult, and their life is shortened because they really can't take care of themselves. And even if they can take care of themselves and they learn how to do it, it's not going to be for a very long time because no one has switched and took care of that mutation. Okay, because a human being, any life form, if it wants to live, it has to have the right things switched on to allow for its survival to adapt to its conditions. And the fact that we are dying every 100 years says that we're not able to adapt to our conditions. And so that's when reproduction comes in. And that's the extension of us. But now, at some point, are we going to be mutating ourselves out of existence? And so this is what I'm hoping that J-Juice stops that negative mutation, because mutations in itself are not bad. It's what strengthens you to be able to adapt to your environment. So if I live here and then I move to like Antarctica, my body will be able to adapt. Now, how I'm going to get cabbage in Antarctica and salt and water and the temperature to allow that good bacteria to grow would be a bit difficult. And I'd have to be, I don't know, I couldn't live in Antarctica unless I would get all that stuff shipped in and I'd live in a bubble, and I would have just, if there's a way I can just magically appear cabbage, water, and salt in jars and the temperature, to be able to create that fermentation. So yeah, that's huge. That's freaking huge. But yes, what it is, that's right. That I was gonna say that post that I said. Jelly juice not only brings you back to what you were originally intended, but it will also help you adapt to your environment in the current state of your surroundings. This is probably why my theory of being the best copy seems to be appropriate, because reproduction is just an extension of you trying to adapt to your environment. But since your current state of your body is not adapting well, that's why reproduction happens, and your children are just an extension of you until your children cannot adapt to the environment that you're in. This is when the end of the line happens in some families. So you see some families, they're probably not going to be able to reproduce anymore because they've mutated themselves out of existence. Continuous indefinite life. The ability to adapt to the changing conditions without suffering weaknesses from the mutations. Okay, that is huge. And then the whole thing with the great influenza outbreak of 1918, viruses on a weak body. See, you should be able to be exposed to viruses without succumbing to those viruses. And then the hyperpigmentation, the spectrum of strength between albinism to hyperpigmentation. So there is a definite spectrum. So are white people weaker than, people of a darker color? But is being too dark make you weaker? I don't know. These are the things that you guys need to start exploring and looking at in your world, okay? But it seems that the lighter you are, the less adaptable you are to a hotter sun. But given that our society is based living in, indoors and on climate controlled settings and on computers, that's a fine adaptation. But you take someone that's super white, like in Sweden, and you put them in the fields of Africa, forget it. They won't be able to survive very long, and unless they're doing something that's going to help them adapt to their environment, because those mutations, them mutating and dealing with the absence of homeostasis of being directly put in front of the sun with a very lack of melanin, those mutations could kill them because they're not strengthening the body to be able to handle the sun exposure, the UV ray exposure. And viruses, yeah, I mean, look at the CDC. They talk about, well, I'm going down my timeline, so. Oh, come on. There was something else that I put. Might have to go. Okay. Too many mutations, you won't able to adapt to your environment properly. Quality of life in question, allergic to your environment. And I say balance. Mutations help you survive and evolve, but too many mutations will cause a quicker death for each generation. Every person is a representation of what end of the spectrum of balancing mutations and adaptation each person is on, and then humanity as a whole. So you see in specific families where they are on the spectrum of adaptability to their mutations as well as the environment. Some are not adapting very well. Those that are constantly sick, that are very, very, very weak, mutated, cancer, disease, and chronic illness, you're seeing that they're not adapting to their mutations as well as the environment because they're not bringing in the right elements, the right bacteria. Because they were able to survive a certain amount of time, but then somehow things got switched off because of the fact that they didn't fix the mutations from the viruses they were exposed to, that are harboring in their body. And that basically what death is your lack of the ability to adapt to your environment and the lack of the ability to adapt to your mutations. That's why death happens. That is the bigger picture. That's the bird's eye view of it all. Then what we've been studying the last couple years, through my group and through my Facebook and through my book, is the specific detailed mechanisms of what causes death. And then the practices and belief systems in our society that contribute to the cause of death, your inability to adapt. The antibiotics in the lab as well as in nature. Because nature and the lab are no different. It's all simplified down to the periodic tables. You can call it Cipro, you can call it dandelion root, you can call it milk thistle, or you can call it, amoxicillin, but it's all the same shit. It's called a different name based upon marketing and what they can sell you. And I don't know if it's necessarily like a conspiracy as an intentional to deceive, or if it's just another way to create cures based upon different conglomeration of elements, because the body does adapt when you bring in poisons. See, here's the thing with you chemtrail activists. Do you realize that whatever barium and exotic spores you've been exposed to, your body will adapt to it. But if you don't have the right elements in your body, you will succumb no matter where you are, because you're already weak. Those that have an axe to grind against a person, as well as a protocol or their environment, they cannot handle their environment. They already have major imbalances. Major. So this is where you have to pay attention to your own internal universe to be able to adapt to your surroundings. If not, sorry, you won't be able to survive anywhere, because you're always going to find something, any environment that you're not going to like. See, when someone says, okay, I'm going to run away from this, I'm going to run away from that. Guess what? You're bringing yourself with you wherever you go. So no matter what, wherever environment you go to on your mutated body, you're never going to find relief, because you're always going to find something wrong in every situation, because you have the imbalance. It's not the environment, it's you. You are the common denominator in your inability to adapt to any situation. And that's huge. That's huge. So if I can live under 5G in the chemtrails and the skies with the barium and all this other stuff, then you can too. But why is it that I can survive and be flourishing and thinking clearly and relaxed, but you're not? Oh, because you have imbalances. You have major viruses. You have issues. You can't adapt to your environment. And so this is what's going to be, what it's going to be as far as our future, as far as politics and the new world order. If you can't adapt to the changing conditions as far as climate as well as politics, yeah, you're not going to be able to survive the changes. And this is why dinosaurs went extinct, or this is why things mutated into now smaller creatures. So they're able to adapt. Or some of these animals out there that are extinct, they didn't have, well, yeah, like a mouse that is friendly to humans in a wild setting. Mice that don't protect themselves, don't run away when they see a big creature because they don't know the intention of that creature. That's their inability to adapt to their environment. Okay? Because now some mice can be pets, but does the mice know that you're going to be friendly to it? No, it needs to run away to protect itself. The fact that some animals go extinct is because they didn't have the ability to adapt to its conditions to protect itself. And yeah, we try to protect some of these animals out there, like the giraffes and the other stuff. But if these animals can't protect themselves, then they're going to go extinct. Now we can, humans have tried to do that, and we are trying to do that. We're trying to cordon off things to create biodiversity, to allow certain things to grow when they weren't able to grow because of human, interaction through no fault of our own. We just do what we do. But humans are the ultimate ones that know how to survive in their environment. But then, are we really? Okay, but maybe now we are. Okay, maybe now we are going to be the ultimate ones that will be able to. But then, we're going to see only a few of us survive indefinitely, and the rest of you are going to have the inability to adapt to your environment because you haven't figured out your own environment, internal and universe, because you're too focused on the politics, the activism. I'm telling you, the activism and the politics are going to be people's demises. And you're focusing on flat Earth versus globe Earth, and you're not focusing on your ability to adapt to your conditions. You're focused on the chemtrails, and you're focused on the 5G, and you're focused on all this stuff. Oh my God, you're focused on the GMO versus organic. Yeah, you will not have the ability to adapt to your situation at all whatsoever. Not at all. Because I can process GMO. I use the GMO cabbage in my ferments. I eat GMO all the time. Okay? I breathe the same skies as all of you, but yet I seem to be healthier than most of you out there who are still activists. Makes you wonder why. Because it's nothing to do with the environment, nothing to do with the GMO or the chemtrails or the 5G. It's to do with my internal universe and what I'm bringing into my body. And then also what I entertain. I don't actively entertain activists on my page because they will change your mentality. They will change your brain development. Be very careful what you entertain out there because they will change your biochemistry. Seriously, they will change your biochemistry. So you have to be careful what you entertain. And so I entertain, watching videos on all of the basic concepts: evolution, Darwinism, natural selection. I mean, they were talking about like the mice that were on the dark rocks that were light were being picked off, but they didn't talk about what caused the mouse from being light to dark. Like the dark mouse on the light rocks weren't able to be survived because they were being picked off by the owls. But they never said, well, what caused that change from being light to dark based upon the rocks? And I'm thinking that bacteria, somehow these bacteria understand the environment and they're able to then turn and switch things. That's my theory that I'm thinking that we are proving indirectly as far as the lactobacillus. That friendly bacteria that's in my ferments right now is giving me the ability to adapt to my surroundings, adapt to the changing conditions. And somehow that bacteria that happens in the wild, even though it doesn't last very long as far as the longevity of that animal. Because it seems that, yes, that bacteria allows them to evolve into be able to switch the fur to change from one color to another, but it doesn't last long in the wild. And I'm thinking because of microbes, the other attacking microbes, the viruses and the bad bacteria come into play. And they don't have the reasoning ability to go and get cabbage water in jars and ferment their stuff. So, but it certainly is very quite. So I mean, the only way I'm able to make that kind of like leap in that assertion that it's a bacteria that's allowing these genetics to be turned on and off based upon the adaptation in the surroundings is the fact that when I take my juice, I don't react so much to all the bullshit that's out there, because I'm always constantly attacked by idiots. Believe me, they get in somehow and whatever, and I ignore and I block whatever. But I don't really I don't really care. I mean, I just block and I don't care. I mean, they don't have access to the information anymore and they won't look for it because that's not their purview and they're not that driven. So they'll succumb to their surroundings, whatever. But I don't react and get all like, oh my God, emotional. It doesn't cause me any undue harm. It doesn't cause me any consternation. It doesn't cause me any stress, because stress and activism will lower your immune system and weaken your body. The ability to bounce back from a slight negative influence to a large negative influence is key. So I noticed that the nutrition, the lactobacillus, the salt is giving me the ability to be able to adapt to now the new world I created for myself. Because I am in a new world than I was 3 years ago. My world today is vastly different than it was 3 years ago. Vastly different. And I'm able to adapt to it. That's huge. The fact that I was able to adapt to living on the truck with my husband for 6 months, the fact that I was able to adapt to his family for a minute and then I had to get out. The fact that I was able to adapt to specific conditions tells me that I have the drive to adapt. Now I just need to get the specific things to then help me sustain the adaptation and not degrade. And that's why I probably was so desperate when I first started this protocol, because I saw myself degrading rapidly from the viruses, from the hormonal imbalances, from the candida, which is yeast overfed, and then from all the mutations from that and all the different PTSD and drama and trauma and all this stuff from years ago to even current day. Okay. But now with my juice, I'm able to adapt today, fix the mutations from even like yesterday, or even from 5 minutes ago. That's huge. And so this is what's key with the J juice, is the ability to be able to adapt to your changing conditions, the climate, as well as anything that happens in your life. Because life is constantly changing no matter what. And if you don't have the ability to change with your environment, you will not survive it. You will not survive it. And it's happening all over. People with cancer, disease, and chronic illness, and rage and regret have the inability to adapt to their environment. That's huge. So when I thought I was done, I was like, oh, I figured out what the virus is and everything. Now it's like adaptation and evolution, and then the bacterias and the genetic switches and the DNA turning on and off. Oh my God. But they're going to be using the probiotics to do that. They're going to use probiotics to go and switch people back but see, can I see them actually taking probiotics, inserting it into somebody's genetics and change, and having those genetics change? I mean, because pain would have to be involved. See, that's the thing. I can't see modern science take probiotics and insert it into the genetic sequence to then change a person who's already, grown in a specific way from those mutations. Because that person who is sustaining those mutations would have to be in pain to sustain those types of biochemical changes. So what they would probably do that is probably in a baby, that they see that has all these genetic mutations, maybe they do inject the probiotics in them, potentially. And then those changes and everything going back to what it was originally, it was supposed to be intended, would happen in the embryonic state, and then they would grow to be a regular human being if they saw that. That's where I can see that happening, to where they would then eradicate the mutations, all the different diseases. But it doesn't speak to when somebody grows up and they sustain these different viruses on a weak body, that they wouldn't sustain other mutations because of their ignorance of this. So yeah, you're born beautiful and you don't have the genetic mutations that they saw initially, so they inject all these probiotics in them, and then the body, changes back to what it was supposed to be before the mutations happen, and they grow up, but then they're exposed to viruses, and those viruses change and mutate a person, and they still contract cancer, disease, and chronic illness. So I don't see that modern science is going to really eradicate cancer, disease, and chronic illness at all, really. Because whether they do it in the womb, where they change everything in the womb, or where they try to do it, compartmentally, with each different disease, is still, your body has to work as a whole. It can't compartmentalize these diseases, and that's the mentality of biotech and academia and the AMA, is compartmentalizing your disease and just doing little tiny changes here and there, little manipulations, little switches here and there, but the programming is already throughout the whole body. So it would be a very temporary thing at best. It wouldn't be a long, sustainable thing, and people would still be dying, and potentially even faster, because now you're manipulating the body, but you're not getting to the root cause, and maybe you see certain changes, but then, I don't know. So anyways, that's just my musings, but that's, yeah, that's huge. That's huge. All right. Yeah. So that's really it for right now. But this is something to think about, okay, guys? The probiotics in the cabbage and the kale and the salt and the water and the J juice is the friendly bacteria that will help you adapt to your surroundings, potentially indefinitely. And then if you're missing arms and legs and organs, well, those that are missing arms and legs and extremities or paralyzed, you know what? You're already in pain. You're taking already pain stuff for your stuff. I mean, because we hear about phantom pain and people who are missing extremities. You have nothing to lose doing the J juice. Nothing to lose. This stuff isn't poisonous. You drink water when you're thirsty. It's probiotic. It's being used and abused all over TV. Okay. And then I know when people say, oh, TV is so programming, anything on TV, you just don't do. And that's my mentality back then, because I was in the conspiracy world. Now things have really changed in my world. I'm completely the freaking opposite, okay? So if you want to go back on my timeline, those of you who are friends with mine, go back on my timeline, you'll see that I was a major conspiracy theorist, hated everything mainstream, totally did not take TV. I mean, TV is still with a grain of salt, because you're still getting a perspective through somebody else's mutations. However, probiotics is not poison. Now, it's the right probiotics is the difference. That's the difference. And it's not with alcohol. It's not with kombucha, not with fruit, not with yogurt, not with milk, not with coconut milk, not with alcohol. But it has to be paired with electrolytes, and it has to have the right nutritive element, cabbage and kale, because those are very densely nutritious. Vitamin K, vitamin U, calcium, different minerals that your body needs. Okay, you can't go. Then when you heal and seal and you're able to absorb, then yeah, you have the diet, the food supply. You're going to have to mitigate sugar a little bit in the beginning, because everybody that has cancer, disease, and chronic illness and aging in our society has a yeast imbalance. What feeds yeast? Sugar, sugar substitutes, heavy metals. And then you have to do the inducing of the actual strategic autophagy. Those are the waterfalls. The carrier force is the water, and then all the electrolytes and the lactobacillus and nutrients, and then it's carrying out all the excess stuff that your body doesn't need, the shit, the parasites, the excess candida, and then yes, you'll be in pain. That's one of the biggest hurdles most people that don't understand J juice, is they don't understand the pain sequence, and deservedly so, because it's been demonized for such a long time. And the AMA, That they have a whole Hippocratic oath against pain. Okay? So yeah, you're not going to see pain being embraced in academia, biotech, any of that, because that's not their focus, their purview. The purview is to keep you in the state that you're in and have you adapt to your mutations until you pass away, relatively pain-free, which really isn't happening, because people who are in hospice or doing chemotherapy are on massive amounts of painkillers and morphine, which is really doing them no favors, but I can't tell them that. And then we have people who are constantly on drugs, who are doing pot, anesthetizing themselves, thinking that inducing fight or flight hormones is the way to go on a continuous basis. When you're inducing fight or flight hormones on a continuous basis, you're breaking your body down on a continuous basis, because your body is always thinking that it's in some kind of stress and duress. And it is, because you're activating and expressing the wrong hormones on a continuous level. The only way you should be activating the fight or flight hormone is if you're actually in freaking danger. But people have created their immune system to be constantly in danger. And then the body finally just breaks down because it finally is in danger, because it's not getting what it needs, because it's in constant stress. Activism induces a fight or flight hormone. You're in constant stress. When you're bullying people and talking smack, you're in constant stress. Fight or flight hormone. You are degrading your body as we speak. Bring in the right nutrients, bring in the right mentality, bring in the right focus. Understand that you can adapt to your surroundings. The chemtrails, the 5G, GMO is not the issue. It really isn't. Your inability to adapt to your surroundings is the issue. Have a good day.